In this podcast, we're going to look at creating a quiz in Desire to Learn. Now, I'm not going to go through an entire process of all the different components of creating the quiz. We're basically going to go in, create the quiz, and we're not going to import the questions. That'll be in a separate video. Nor are we going to set the submission views. That also will be in a separate video. So to start the process, we go to Assessments and Quizzes, and we need to create a new quiz. So we click on the New Quiz button, and we'll need to give it a name. This is actually going to be for Chapter 10. And the process is the same whether you call it a quiz or a test. So I've got my name in there. And I'm going to copy this because I'm going to use it when I go over to assessment and create the grade item. Now, the categories, that's only if you're breaking your quizzes up into categories. This is not a category in the grade book. This would be like if you wanted to separate like lab from textbook quizzes or quizzes from exams. So they're organized for you into those two groups. If you don't want to do that, there's no reason to select a category. If you do want to do that, you can always come back and do that later. And once again, we're not going to input the quiz questions. If I go down a little bit further, we have a place to put in a description or an introduction. Now, the difference is the description will show up in the content area under the link for the quiz. The introduction is actually going to show up after they open the file. So you can use either one of them, or you can use both. And to use one, you actually have to turn it on. And I'm just going to type in some text here. Okay. And if I scroll on down, I have a place for headers and footers, also some advanced properties of allowing hints, disable right click. You may want to do this. That makes it harder for the students to print things. And then you can disable pagers and alerts, so those two tools do not work. These two are probably things you want to turn on with a check mark there. And there's a place to put in notification emails. That will let you know as attempts have been made on the quiz. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save this page. And then I'm going to go over to Restrictions. On the Restrictions tab, this is where we set the status. If you want it to be available, you can go ahead and make this active. And then you can restrict it by date. If you want it to be active starting immediately, you do not need to put a start date. You can just go over and put an end date. And I'm going to go ahead and set the end date. Automatically, it's going to put it ahead by 1 week, which is fine. And then for the time, I'm going to make it 11:59 p.m. And the reason you'd want to put 11:59 is that'll keep it at the end of the day. If you put it on midnight or 1200, that's going to put it on the calendar for the next day. And the students oftentimes think that they have that entire next day to do it, even though it actually ends on the first minute of that day, right at midnight. So 11:59 is a much better or less confusing option for that. Now you have the ability to attach release conditions. So maybe you want them to take a sample test or a sample quiz first. You can do those conditions on an exam. I'm not going to put any on this one. There's a place to put in a password if you'd like to password the quiz. Now down below we have a place for timing. And if you don't want it timed, you just leave this set to no time limit. If you want to enforce a time limit, then you would click on this. And it comes in two components. One is the amount of time you're giving them, and then the second one is the grace period. And what a lot of people do, if they want to give them an hour for the test, they'll put 55 minutes here and a 5-minute grace period. Now, below that, under late behavior, I think probably the middle option is the most common. That allows the student to take the test, and when time runs out, they can no longer save the test. So they're no longer able to continue answering questions and save it, and it will mark it as late if they go beyond that. The other options, quizzes flag late, but student can continue working. You're never going to know if they save more answers after the time limit with that one. That's one downside to it. And the last one is the quizzes flag late. The student continue working, and quiz will automatically be scored as a 0 after the specific limit. At that point, you're going to have to go in and look at the quiz and manually enter grades if you do that. So generally, that middle option is the most common one that's used. And then below, special access. If a student needs special access, so if they have like a medical excuse, you want to give them, reopen the quiz for them, you would go here to set that up. I don't need to do that at this point. I'm just going to go ahead and save this. Now on the third tab, this is where we set up our grade item. That's under assessment. The first thing we want to do is put a check here to automatically grade the test. And then I need to add a grade item. And here, I'm going to put in the name. Now I copied the name from the quiz name entry point, and I'm going to paste that here. And the reason I do that is I like to keep the name of the quiz and the name of the grade item the same. It cuts down on confusion later. Now we have another category selection here. This would be the category in the grade book. So if you have your grade book broken down to assignments and quizzes, for example, you would want to select that category for the grade item here. You can't set up a new category here, but you can put one into a category that already exists. Later, you can always create categories if you don't have them now and then move the grade item in. That will not affect it at all. Then here's where you put how many points the test is worth. So I'm going to make this a 50-point quiz. And then we have some options as far as there's 3 check boxes there. Can exceed, bonus, and exclude from final grade calculation. If you want them to be able to get more points than what are possible, say maybe you have some extra credit that you're going to apply and you want to make it like 51 or 52 points, you have to have a check in that first box. If the whole quiz is an extra credit quiz, then you want to put a check in the bonus box. And the third box there will exclude it from the final grade calculation. Then we have a grade scheme. If you're doing points for it, you generally want to take this one, which the default is percentage. And that's going to be if you get it for percentage or for points. Otherwise, you could have like complete, not complete. There's other schemes built in, but the most typical one is going to be percentage. And then if you have any rubrics, you can put or attach those here. And then you can restrict the visibility of the grade item. There's not much reason to hide the grade items. You can hide the quiz so they can't start the quiz, but there's not really a reason to hide the grade item from the grade book. So basically on this page, you're generally going to have an entry here, the 2 required things there, and then under grade points. So name and the maximum points. And then I'm going to go down here and click Save. Notice I have my grade item here now. I also want to put a check in this box, which will allow the grade to be exported automatically to the grade book. And then there's also a place to attach a rubric here. And that's not a real common option. Below, we have the number of attempts that are allowed right here. If you want to allow more than 1 attempt, you would select that from the list. You can set it for unlimited attempts through, and then 1 through 10 are the other options. After you've selected one of those, you would hit the apply button. And then if you've allowed multiple attempts, you can select whether you want to give them the highest attempt, lowest attempt, the average of attempts, the first attempt, or the last attempt. And generally, you're going to take the highest attempt for that. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and click Save here. Now, we're not using the objectives component within Desire to Learn, so you're not going to have anything to put here on the fourth tab. The submission views, this will be a separate video on how to customize this. Basically, what's going to happen after the student takes the test, they're going to see their score. And that's the default view, and that will be until the quiz closes. Okay? And then we have a tab for report setup. And you're not going to need to use that to create a quiz. So I've done all my options, and I'm going to go ahead and click Save and Close. Now, as I said before, there's going to be a separate video on how to put the questions in, and then one on submission views. And that's all there is to creating a quiz in Desire to Learn.